I'd like to present a word problem. So this all happened yesterday when I was doing some, let's just say, doing some practice with one of my Hispanic students, trying to guess at certain Spanish words. He gave me a bunch of numbers, and I was able to figure those out pretty well. Several other words, figure them out pretty well. And notice the student was 8 years old. He pulls out the word PEDO. And first thing that came to mind, I thought this got to be the Spanish word for foot. No, it's not the Spanish word for foot. So is it the leg, the toe? What is this? I thought it's got to be something to do with the foot. And sure enough, it wasn't. So then the next guess I had was it's got to be the word for I fart. And that's from the Latin word. If it is a verb, the word I fart would be PETO. Now, here's the problem. In Latin, PETO originally was a verb. In Spanish, I thought, well, for sure this has got to be a verb. So I asked, okay, so if I had PETO, that's our word for I fart, then in Spanish you have to say pediste, would have to be you farted. Well, one of my other students says, no, that means you asked. So I thought, what in the world, you asked? What's that got to do with anything? And so I thought about it for a little bit, looked up the verb charts in Spanish, and this is what I found. So in Latin, we have the word pedo, I fart, pedis, you fart, pedit, he, sure, it farts, and then we have pedimus, peditis, pedunt. We have the word for I fart. We also have the word PETO. So we have PETO, I ask, okay? And what happens here is in Spanish, PETO, petis, petit, petimus, petitis, petunt gets mixed up. We have the word PETO and we have the word PEDO. So PETO means I'm asking. PEDO means I'm farting. And in Latin, these are two different words. We have a very distinct t sound in PETO and a very distinct d in PEDO. Now, what happens over 2,000 years? We have some people that say, instead of I'm asking you for permission, they might say PETO, and it turned into PEDO. PEDO. You're going to start hearing PEDO with the D. And at first, of course, people would say, wait a second, are you farting the permission or asking the permission? Okay, that doesn't make any sense. Of course you're asking it. Of course you're asking it. And so over time, you would still spell it PETO in Spanish, but in Spain, people started pronouncing it as PEDO with the D sound. And over time, what ends up happening is it completely replaces it. So we have PETO turns into PEDO. Yo PEDO. And two petis turns into pedis. Petit, he, she, it asks, turns into pede. We have petimus, we ask, turns into petimus. And petistis, notice there's two T's, petitis. Petitis turns into petis. Gets a little bit shorter. And then petunt, notice petunt with the T is they fart versus pedunt means pedunt, they fart, petunt, they ask. It turns into pedon. It's turning into a D. And because of that, the word for fart has to drop out in the Spanish language. So we don't have a verb anymore. We don't have the verb form, which used to be distinctly pepedi, I farted, and then pepedisti, you farted. So we have two P's, pepedi, I farted. And so this is where I would have thought pepedi means I farted. You could just drop the P and you could make it pedi, I farted. That would be what I would think Spanish could have turned into. It could have just been pedi, I farted. But here's the problem. What does peti turn into? I asked. We have yo pedi. And so in Spanish, I farted. If you had yo pedí as I asked and yo pedí as I farted, these would end up being synonyms. And so then the question is, how do I differentiate between peti and pedi in Latin? The word used to be very easy to distinguish. You had I asked as in a question, peti. I farted, pepidi. You got the double P, pepidi, I farted, and peti, I asked. Now in Spanish, we would have pedi and pedi. We'd have two different words that both sound like pedi. How do we tell them apart? You simply have people turning it into a noun, and not peti, I asked, and pedi, I farted. But you had just pedi means I asked. And then if you wanted to say I farted, you'd have to say I did, or I, whatever we want to say, I shot out PEDO, and we're going to have to use the noun form and distinguish it from the verb form. So basically in Spanish, the word PEDO now comes from pedor, which used to mean filth or rubbish or nastiness. And basically it was third declension, pedor, pedoris. You'd have pedorem and the accusative. And so all those endings get dropped out, but we still use this word PEDO. We still use the word PEDO as a noun. We just don't use PEDO as a verb. And so that was where I got confused, because I have a classics degree. I study Latin. I do not speak Spanish, but I've been interested in picking up Spanish and figuring it out from the little bit of Latin I know. And to realize that PEDO, I would have immediately thought Spanish has to be using PEDO as the verb. It's actually PEDO from the word pedor, pedoris, the noun form of the word to fart. So this is our noun form, and that would be where we get the word PEDO if I said in Spanish PEDO. And the verb that used to mean PEDO, I fart, is completely gone. The verb form in Spanish has disappeared. And so because of that, pepedi in Latin disappeared in Spanish. Pepedisti disappeared in Spanish. And why can I not say tu pepedisti anymore in Spanish and say you farted? Because we have the verb pedi and pedistes in the past tense. So if I look at this up, petivi, I asked, turns into yo pedi, I asked. If I said tu petisti with the T, in Spanish we have oh, I spelled that wrong. It should have said pediste. I spelled it with a T because I'm comparing it to Latin. That should say pediste. So if I wanted to say you asked the question, tu pediste, petit, he, she, or it asked, turns into pedio. If you wanted to say petimos, we asked petimus, we're going to say pedimos. And if we wanted to say petistis, you guys asked, you're going to have petistes. And if we're going to say petierunt, they ask, it's going to be pedieron. And pedieron would be the asked. And so basically what we have is the entire verb chart in Latin going from a T to Spanish a D. And because of that shift, the word PETO, I seek or I ask, has to then replace the word for I farted. And that's basically what we get. And so that's something that I thought was just an interesting phenomenon that occurred, that actually with the consonantal shift from a T to a D, you actually replaced one verb with another. So anyways, thank you for anyone who finds this remotely interesting. It might only be, a few people here and few and far between. But if you do study Latin and Spanish, this is an interesting concept, that things like this can actually replace something, one word with the other. So think about it. It's an interesting concept, and I will see you guys later. And that is how PEDO means a fart, and pediste does not mean you farted. It means you asked.